Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Delivering Dunamis podcast, where we are inspiring transformation through the strength and the power of the Almighty. My name is Matthew Deibler, and I would like to welcome you to Thirsty Thursday. Thirsty Thursday. We've called this series Thirsty Thursday simply because the Holy Spirit is our focus on these weekly episodes, and the Holy Spirit is the living water, the one true thirst quencher for believers. Today, the title of this message is Words Matter. Words matter. I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story about my father. Most of you know from previous episodes, my dad passed on April the 1st after a battle with COVID-19 and more specifically, COVID-related pneumonia. My dad was hospitalized the afternoon of March the 1st, which was the day before my book launch. My book being The Devil and the Children of God at the End of the World. It was a really emotional time for me preparing for that book launch. I mean, it was a very significant event in my life, and I was excited and maybe a little anxious too. I knew that my dad wasn't feeling great, but I never anticipated that he would be hospitalized. And it was that day when he went to have a chest x-ray done and they discovered the pneumonia, and they took him right from that chest x-ray in an ambulance to the hospital. I talked to him that afternoon, and his spirits were still up. I mean, we all believed that he would get the treatment he needed, and I felt really good about him being in that hospital. He would get the proper treatment he needed, and, in a matter of time, he'd be over this hump. My dad in the hospital, he believed that he was surrounded by just people of great character. He believed that he was in great care. He believed that he was surrounded by angels. I don't know how my dad really looked at it per se. He would call the care team, the nurses, he would call them angels. I think he just saw them as people, like I said, of great character. Personally, I believed that there were angels there present with my dad in prayer, and I was heavy in prayer. I felt the presence of those angels comforting him. And there was something about that place that was really, really special, because I saw my dad's faith take on a whole new level. And my dad was always a firm believer. He never really wavered in his faith. But there was something Holy Spirit driven that took over, because my dad became very active in the spirit in that hospital. And you've got to remember, my dad was a COVID-19 patient. So they essentially isolated him. And when people would come into the room, it was generally one at a time, and they were just suited up with all of the protective gear. I mean, he spent a lot of time alone in that room. However, that did not in any way impede him from making an impact on those around him. The Holy Spirit really took over. And my dad, as a servant for God's kingdom, an obedient servant who had a desire to, you know, remain in a place of hope and peace, and had a desire to have God's voice magnified through him. He just, it was amazing. Like, he took on this role of servant in the time when he was really in a place where he was in need of great care. He started ministering to people. And I knew this because we would talk every day on the phone or through text message, and he would share some stories. And because the timing of his stay in the hospital lined up with my book launch, conversations that he would have with people were often related to my book. My dad had this way of making people very comfortable. He was an excellent salesperson in his career, and then he became an entrepreneur. He was a coach. Anybody that knew my dad just really loved him because he was easy to talk to. And so that was a gift that God had given him, and he used it very well throughout his life. And so he was empowering that gift to draw people in. And then the Holy Spirit was essentially just on fire within him. And it was like, his cup was overflowing. So the truth just poured out from his lips, and the love and this reflection, this image of God was just so present in him during his stay in the hospital. And he was there for 10 and a half days. But again, this lined up perfectly with my book launch. And so a lot of the conversations that he had as he drew people nearer to him and learned more about their life stories and some of the perhaps adversities that they were facing, either personally or with other members of their family. As he drew them nearer, he felt moved to share my book, and it was really powerful. I think I shared this on a previous podcast episode that my dad sent several messages to me where he said, I spoke to so-and-so and they shared this about what's going on with their son or their daughter, or, I spoke to this person who's really feeling lost and in need of some guidance. And anyway, in every scenario, he shared my story and, my redemption through Jesus Christ. And in each case, those individuals went home and purchased the book and were eager to read it. That was really touching to me. My dad just spoke very openly about his faith during his stay in that hospital. There was no restraining it. And I believe that was the Holy Spirit at work in him. And I wanted to do this message today. And I wanted to call it Words Matter because that was something specific that he shared with me through a text message. And what he was referring to was, and I'll read the text that he actually sent me. This goes back to March the 9th. So my dad at that point had been in the hospital for about 8 days. And he said, "Yesterday I told the food service lady that she was an angel. She said, 'This is why I'm on earth.' Then he said, later the nurse told me that I made Linda cry, Linda being the food service lady. He said, I initially felt bad as to how I may have offended her. And she said, no, it was because you called her an angel from heaven." And then the next thing he said was, words do matter. Words matter. And when you're living in the Holy Spirit, when you're allowing God's voice to be magnified through you, the right words come at the perfect time. We don't know how much Linda needed those words that day, why they touched her heart in the way that they did, but God knows. God knows everything about Linda's life, everything that she's been through. He recognizes every trial. He recognizes when she needs a pick-me-up, an encouragement. And so when the Holy Spirit is at work, that's essentially God working through us. My dad was just channeling that. He was the obedient servant, the vessel to bring that message forward that day. Most of you have heard of the fruit of the Spirit. So in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, it says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Again, love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the fruit of the Spirit. And my dad was just such a powerful reflection of that. Particularly during that stay in the hospital. God was clearly at work, and my dad was a faithful servant, obedient to the call, and he used his time when he could have just, stayed isolated, grumbled about his condition, and not impacted his soul. He allowed the Holy Spirit instead to use him in those last days of his life in a powerful way to touch the lives of others. Words matter. And if you care about your words and how they affect those around you, you really need to commit to a Spirit-driven life. Because the flesh, it's in opposition. And when we're living in the flesh, sometimes we're careless and we don't think about how not only our actions, but our words affect others. We impede God's voice. And what comes out of us is not pure. And oftentimes it's not kind. Life in the Spirit transforms all of that. And it's amazing to sit back and witness the impact that it can have on humanity when we allow it to shine through. Words matter. I love you all. God bless.